Right, hi everyone. We've overrun slightly, so I've been ordered, strict orders. We're going to do this slightly compacted, so it's going to be a 45-minute session. Specifically, it's a session obviously focused on care experience young people. It's the title's Homelessness and Financial Independence, but we're going to lean much more into the financial side because yesterday we did workshops around homelessness and housing. But please, these things are always interlinked, and finances and affordability of accommodation is a massive part of financial independence for those who people have talked about the cliff edge of leaving care. So I'm sure housing and homelessness will come into the debate as well. We're going to try and split it slightly. So in a second, I'll get the panel to introduce themselves. So the first half, we're going to focus on some of the challenges, and that might be kind of drivers for poverty. It might be some of the kind of technical challenges. So because we've got quite a diverse panel, some of it will be about lived experience and some of the kind of emotive side, the challenges that are felt, but some might be more policy. And the point about a diverse panel is that you get those diverse perspectives as well. And then we will go onto some of the solutions. So hopefully we'll leave with a bit of hope. This session's been recorded, so actually they're going to kind of share and try and collate some of the suggestions that are made. So we'll go into some of the solutions and some of the positive opportunities. And of course, some of the people on this panel are delivering some of those positive opportunities, so they'll be sharing that as well. Just to introduce myself, so I'm Ed Titherley. I'm the, people have probably heard this already, but I'm many things, but in this context, I'm the Director of Services at Centrepoint, who is the largest provider of housing and homeless services to care leavers in the country. So I have that angle, but I'm supposed to shut up. I'm supposed to facilitate, so I will try and do that. I'll get on to the first question soon, but yeah, let's go for the introductions, and we'll start to my right.
Hello, I'm Gavin Oldham. I'm the founder and chair of the Share Foundation. We're a registered charity which runs the Junior ISA and Child Trust Fund schemes for young people in care throughout the whole of the United Kingdom, all devolved nations as well. We've been doing that for the last 12 years.
Hi guys, I'm Sal Moore. I'm obviously representing family rights group, and I'm a care leaver myself, so I'm here to represent all the care leavers and foster children.
Hi, I'm Daniel Lucia. I'm actually the managing director of Homewood Group. We're an employer in London, generally within the M25, so we're a bit slightly different to a number, but in very diverse sectors from hospitality to construction to soft services.
Brilliant, thank you.
Hi, I'm Dan Jones. I'm the Chief Executive of Settle. We work with young people leaving the care system, supporting them as they make their transition into living independently.
Hi, I'm Kerry Nichol. I'm Support Services Manager at Reese Foundation. We're a charity that supports care experienced people of all ages, and we do offer some financial budgeting support around that and a grant scheme as well.
Hello everyone. I'm just pretending to be a grown-up most of the day. I think I'm doing all right. I'm Ian Thomas. I'm here today with the Reese Foundation, background in social work, criminology, and currently doing a PhD.
Brilliant. So a really diverse. I think it's going to be really fascinating. Lots of insight, and so I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So the first conversation is about the drivers or the challenges, either from a personal experience that people are willing to share, or indeed the perspectives you have from your professional on the organisation that you're representing. So, Gavin, if you're happy to start, we're sharing mics, so I'm going to hand you this one.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I will focus on the financial independence point because that's where our real focus is. There are two things you need for that. One is resources, and second, you need life skills. Let's start with the resources to begin with. Were you aware of the fact that there's nearly over £250 million worth of unclaimed child trust funds for young people from low-income backgrounds, which are HMRC allocated. So the only people who know about them is HMRC. And one of our big issues, and going beyond the issue for young people in care, is to actually join people up with their child trust funds, which is a really big issue. I've got a meeting with Emma Reynolds, the Economic Secretary to the Treasury, on the 7th of May on that precise topic. But I think it illustrates what the issue is, really, because there are resources which are available there, which haven't been claimed. And that also applies, I have to say, for adult care leavers as well. Our program with the Department for Education completes at the age of 18. And in order to make sure that we can actually go on connecting people with their accounts, which they've got set up, we've had to introduce what we call a bilateral agreement with local authorities throughout the country so that we can have the details of young people, adult care leavers, after 18, so that we can actually follow them up and make sure that they do claim their money and actually get that in place. And that is a big, big challenge. So for all sectors, I mean, there is money there. We need to make sure it is developed, because that, I know it's only a small amount, but that starter capital account is really important for getting underway, especially bearing in mind the cliff edge that we heard about earlier. The other thing is life skills. I mean, we have a situation where we have no GCSE in financial awareness in this country. Why the hell not? You know, you have only 25% of young people leave school with anything which they regard as financial capability. You know, I mean, that's just crazy. And for young people in care, they have the added problem that they're in and out of school all the time. They don't have a chance, really, to focus on that. And so, you know, that's a big challenge as well. And we've discovered the only way of really tackling that is to bring in what we call incentivized learning, which is earn as you learn. And it is really effective. We find that people do take the course all the way through, and they do find out about it. But I'd like to say that those are the two big challenges. It's called resources, and it's called life skills. And if you have those, the world is your oyster. You can actually go out there and actually have a go at things. But it's a big challenge to make sure they are delivered. Thanks.
So I'm obviously going to bring things from a personal perspective. Of course, I'm not really good at maths, but when it comes to money, I just love seeing all of those little, like, you know, zeros and everything. But when I did turn 18 a couple of years ago, I kind of was financially just independent. No one told me what to do with that money. And obviously after, when you're a care, like, you know, leaver, you have to live by yourself, you have to do all of these things, rent, bills, everything else. But for me, I had an experience where I had to pay two separate rents. Like, one was a semi-independent, and then the other one was my flat. And honestly, at that point, I gave up completely. I was like, just take my money. I want to escape this. I don't want to keep thinking about money. I don't want to keep thinking about a shelter. Like, of course, there's this thing when you're a care kid. I was placed in care when I was about 7 years old. Of course, the whole thing, you know, with the what is it, bin bags, the black bin bags, you are placed in a stereotype automatically because all of your, like, personal belongings are placed in something that you throw your trash away with. And for me, I already put myself in that stereotype where I was like, I'm going to be on benefits for the rest of my life. I'm not going to make it anywhere. There's no one to support me. I've had so many different social workers, so I gave up on ever thinking about having a future in, like job-wise, university-wise, or anything like that. So I gave up at a very young age. But, of course, later on, I did overcome that slowly.
Slightly different, where I'm probably going to come from an employment perspective, from an employer. It's probably easy if I give you just a bit of an overview of us as a business. We don't actually advertise anywhere, online or any platform. All our recruitment, other than a very bespoke recruitment, if we're working in a track environment, for example, will come just from some referrals from partners, Crisis UK, Drive Forwards, or the DWP. So we sort of see a lot of this perspective of where I'm going to come from, probably supporting a bit what we've just said there. The hardest bit we see, and it's maybe a bit sort of like Radical was saying, I'm going to give an example of a guy that we had with us, and four of my guys were with me today, but they've gone home today, so they're a bit tired, so it's a bit of a shame. I think they were going to heckle me earlier. We had a guy recently left, he was 18, living in Hastings, okay, with his brother. And he'd been brought up in care. All his social network, all his friends were in Hastings. At 18, the only place available for him was to move to Finchley in North London, really down the road. placed in a home, in a bedsit, for want of a better way of describing it. And then he was asked to be financially independent from that point onwards. It's very simple. You're a grown person now, you're 18, living in a bedsit. Go to the DWP, go and get your UC. There was nothing else, there was no other support around. Yeah? And you've got to think of it from that perspective. So as an employer, 90% of the time, if it wasn't for what we do as a business, and I'm going to sound very callous in my approach in what I'm going to say, it becomes quite hard work. Because you're having to go backwards to support that individual into employment. Because we're not thinking. We're not thinking they don't have any financial support, no one at home. We're not thinking that they don't actually understand the management of what they've got to do, and that fear. Yeah, there's no fallback. But more importantly, we're not actually helping or supporting them out of that cycle. So if someone's in that cycle, it becomes a very negative cycle that we do force the culture, sadly, of a lot of people will leave employment quite regularly. Yeah. What we have done, because it's very negative, sorry to start like that, but it's a very negative approach of what happens. Yeah, we pigeonhole someone and we put them on the back foot before they start. So what we have done as a business as a result of that, to try and overcome that, is we will only work with certain referral partners, pure and simply because then we can build a program in place. And the reason I'm bringing this up is to give you an example of where the barriers that we're facing for some of these guys. Making sure they understand got the correct bank account, understanding their rights in regards to accommodation, how and the implications if they don't pay their accommodation, the importance between ensuring you've got a month planning in advance on how you manage your finances, because you've got to eat. What becomes more important? Yeah, how do you build that infrastructure in place? And people then get their first month's salary, and all of a sudden it's Christmas. Yeah, and then they're coming to you and saying, "Oh, I haven't got enough money to eat. What do I do?" An employer would normally, we do it anyway, but you go for the cash advance, but then you're always in arrears. It's no different to a loan, cash day loan, to be frank, because by the time you get paid the next month, you're already in arrears from the previous month. And it's these really basic tasks that they don't have the luxury, a lot of these guys, to be able to go to someone and say, "Mum, Dad, yeah, sister, brother, uncle, aunt." Yeah, it's the very simple, basic things that we don't see. And these are a lot of the things then that we find that people then get lost in the system, become quite isolated, and they get in a real sort of spiral of negativity.
Everything that people have said, and Salma particularly, we see very much the same thing. So at Settle, we work with young people who have just begun living independently. They're in their first accommodation, and a third of them, by the time we come to them, are already in arrears. And there's, I think, probably two big drivers for that. One is if they're transitioning to universal credit, they're having a delay on their universal credit, but there's no delay on their rent. But the other, which we see quite often, is the same as Salma's story, where people are covering two sets of costs as they're making that transition. So we see young people put on the back foot as they begin living independently. They're already in debt. They're already pushed back, exactly as Daniele's saying. Most of the young people that we work with are on universal credit, and the very simple kind of financial independence issue with universal credit is it's not enough. And particularly for young people who are under 25, it's not enough. It's not enough anyway, but the assumption that if you're under 25, someone else is going to be there helping you out, you're not meeting all the costs. But for the young people that we work with, for young people leaving the care system, you are meeting all the costs. You are responsible for everything, and you're being paid less money, and even if you're getting the full amount, it's not much. So we see an increase, the coaches that work with young people see an increase in negative budgets where there simply isn't enough money coming in to meet rent, bills, and outgoings. So the key kind of issue, I think, in terms of financial independence is the amount of money. We do work with young people on budgeting and financial skills, but I think fundamentally the issue that we see is that the system is set up not to put enough money into young people's pockets. And I think one of the big challenges as well is moving into employment can become really challenging, because the way that if you're getting your universal credit and you're also getting housing benefit as a separate issue, because they're on different tapers, you actively lose money by becoming employed. Other panels have talked about the amount of money that's available for apprentices and the fact that wages are set very low. We're basically setting young people up with a system that assumes they're living with a pet, they're living with their family, they're living with someone else, they've got that support network. This is a group of young people who don't have that support network. They don't have anyone to fall back on, and we don't provide enough money for them to make a go of it.
Dan, I was going to say all of that. Essentially, that's our experience as well. And my background is, before I came to Rees Foundation, I worked in local authorities for 16 years in leaving care. I was a personal advisor, then a social worker, then a team manager. And it just isn't doable on the under 25 rate. You're talking less than £75 a week to pay all of your bills, all of your food, all of your travel. And there's a real sort of discrepancy there between, there's an acknowledgement when it comes to the amount of rent you can get, that there is an exemption from the shared room rent. So if you're under 25 in this country and you're claiming money to pay for your rent, you can normally only claim the local housing allowance rate for a room in a shared house. It's accepted that care leavers can be exempt from that and can actually claim up to the 1-bedroom rent, because care leavers don't really have a choice at 18. They have to live independently. They're not just choosing to move out from home. So therefore, you can claim the 1-bedroom rate. So if you can get a social tenancy, you might just be able to get the rent money to cover that social tenancy if you're ready and if you're lucky, if there isn't a top-up from the housing association. But that still doesn't change the £70-odd a week that you have to pay all your bills from and all your food from. And it's also about how we support young people initially to even move into those social tenancies, because what I found is that the housing associations who would offer properties to young people would need a deposit in advance. And the local authority I work for said, well, we can't afford to pay that deposit. So actually, yes, you're going to have to get a payment plan in place. So they move into that property on day one in debt. And then they are having to pay from that £70-odd a week, not just all their bills, all their food, but they're having to pay a contribution to that deposit element that's got them the property in the first place. I think, again, we see lots of problems with people working in universal credit, and especially when you think about the kinds of jobs that we all start off doing. They're transient jobs, they're low-paid jobs. They might be 0-hour contracts. And if anything, that just messes up your benefit income and then leaves you in a position where you owe even more money to your landlord. So I think it's a really tough landscape out there for people when they leave care. And all of that then contributes to homelessness, because you're getting rent arrears and your landlord isn't happy about that either. So the changes need to happen in terms of how we support 18-year-olds who really, we're asking them to do the impossible. It's something that I wouldn't be able to do now, you know, as a proper grown-up with lots of financial experience under my belt, and I can budget. But this isn't just about learning how to budget, because you can't budget when there's not enough money to start with.
Yeah, I think, you know, protecting care leavers to be able to sort of, you know, buy food and pay their rent is about social protection measures, you know, which should be a really high priority. I think for me, I mean, I left care a week before my 17th birthday, and by the time I was 18, I was in custody, and then I left custody and went to my local authority and asked for a £70 deposit to get a key to go and live in a YMCA hostel, and they told me to leave. We don't owe you anything, Ian, you've already left care, it's too late. And then 3 weeks later, I was back in prison, and I remember feeling like this relief, you know, to go back to prison, thinking, fucking hell, it's too hard out there, you know. And then I didn't really get it together until I was sort of in my early 20s, and I spent a lot of my teens in and out of custody and sleep, you know, street homeless, drug addicted, and, you know, and it's interesting, as I'm listening to the panel talk and I'm reflecting, I probably wasn't in, I was in my late, I'm not that old. I was in good cream. I was in my late 20s until I could buy food, and the decision to buy that food was based on whether I felt like that food rather than whether I could afford to eat that food. you know. And now I live probably quite like a middle-class lifestyle. Like, I'm not poor, my car's not stolen, I still haven't got a TV license, but I'm working on it, you know. But, like, you know, and I don't have to steal food anymore, you know, and because stealing food was a big thing for me. I still think it tastes better when you nicked it, but it's not, it's not sustainable. I'm testament, it's not sustainable. And then in my kind of professional capacity, you know, I used to do a lot of direct work with young people leaving care. And, you know, it's just that look in their eyes, you know, when they get their flat, the promise of freedom. And, you know, you talk to them about the bills and budgeting for food, and their flipping head falls off, you know, and you just see that fear in their eyes and that anxiety and that worry, and, you know, it's that in your stomach, you know, and I think, you know, I spent most of my 20s, like, waking up most mornings thinking, like, I don't know if I'm going to make this. Like, I just, you know, one, I don't want to get smashed today, and two, like, I just don't know if I'm going to be okay. And, like, I can really see that in young people that I work with, and it's, you know, that's a lot to carry on top of the disproportionate responsibility that you're carrying that's been bestowed upon you with, you know, not just because of socio-economic disparity, but kind of psychological, emotional, in some cases spiritual burden of trauma and separation and fear and altered senses of safety and suspicion, distrust, and all the psychological stuff that's going on for people that we probably don't talk about enough either. You know, and then you don't want to ask for help because your self-esteem's through the floor, you know, and then see your ego kicks in to overcompensate for your low self-esteem, and then you start pushing everyone away, and then local authorities and councils go, well, you're intentionally homeless. Do you know what I mean? And it's a really, like, difficult phenomena to bridge, and I guess really it takes wisdom to see intention, but we're often judged on our presentation.
Awesome. Guys, yeah, good. I was about to say, let's clap the panel, because, like, next door, they're, like, clearly step up, guy. I know. Come on. Right. I know, exactly. Let's ram the doors down. Let's have it. Right, focus, financial independence. This is going to sound really mundane after some of this, but there's stuff we're talking about, and just because now we're hopefully going to go into the more positives and some of the solutions and some positive experiences. But actually, we framed that challenge so well there, I think, panel. I was kind of like, okay. I've learned quite a few things. Like, I've put hundreds of people through rent deposit, but I've never thought about it as going, you're in debt already. And I was like, that's a different perspective. There's something about moving into employment. Trust me, I'm no way being partisan, but my organisation's just developed this affordability calculator about moving into employment that hasn't been done before for young people, which is a cool thing, and everyone can, we're putting it out there. We're not owning it at all. But yeah, that point about money doesn't cover it has been quite a theme. And there was a phrase when we were on the panel, I think, you can't budget your way out of poverty. Let's say you want a budgeting exercise where it still doesn't add up. And please, we're asking people to engage in society when they can't actually afford to engage in society. It's not just even about the basics, it's about a sense of social belonging. It's about a platform for life. Lots of examples. Daniele's example of the young person from Hastings, and Selma, you're talking about, like, being asked to put your possessions in a black bag, and like, all these things. There's a sense of poverty beyond just having the money. And then it's got to be the best one. I've saved this till last, but the fact, a new insight that food tastes better if you've nicked it. And I'm going to try that out. I don't know how. Maybe I'm just going to nick it off my mum, and I'm going to try that. But we're going to work on that. So please, just to manage time a bit, we need to rein just slightly more succinct to come in on time. So, but we'll go through, like, the positives, either examples of things that have worked, or initiatives that are out there or positive, or what your organisation's doing, or experiences you've had that was a win.
Thanks. Well, having just been told that, I'd better not get locked into what I call the black hole of economics, which is the inability of our society to be able to use the human life cycle to actually put money into the hands of young people who come from disadvantaged backgrounds, which I think is one of the big problems. We collect £8.2 billion a year in inheritance tax. I have asked the Treasury over and over again to ring-fence that and make that available only for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds to give them a decent start in life. But they can't do it because public finances are so precarious that they desperately need it to mend the holes in the road and to pay interest on the debt. So actually, we have to find new ways of doing that. Now, ideally, a young person from any background, I mean, if you have a child or a grandchild of your own, you would want to actually enable them to be able to use the bank of mum and dad or whatever in order to get going in life. And we ought to make sure that that sort of resource and life skills are available for every young person who leaves care at the age of 18. But we don't have the accessibility to that sort of money at the moment. So, I know it's a big issue. I've been to the Department for Education, asked them to match fund the incentivized funding which we put into the Life Skills Program Step Ladder Plus. And they couldn't do that for this year, but because the Treasury has said no more money is to be spent on anything which is not already budgeted. So I would say to you this, that we need a partnership between philanthropists and government to really make the money come alive. We've now put a proposal in for a Child Trust Fund Mark II focused on low-income young people throughout the country, which would be philanthropically funded. And I'll be discussing that with the Economic Secretary on the 7th of May. And it'll be really interesting to see how that works. It does need cooperation from government because they have to provide the regulation and the logistics to make these things work. But philanthropists can put in a huge amount of money. And that's even in advance of any sort of hypothecation of inheritance tax. So I think there are solutions available to us. I mean, I don't know if any of you know about inheritance tax, but if you actually give 10% of your estate to charity, then your inheritance tax rate drops from 40 to 36%. Well, that is actually quite substantial. It means the government actually is paying 3/4 of it anyway. And so, there are routes where philanthropy can actually provide a route through this. And so I would like to feel that we'll work on that kind of route in the future in order to generate the money that we need, because we urgently need this. The Resolution Foundation made a proposal some years ago that £25,000 should be available for young people when they became 25. Now, I didn't agree with every aspect about what they did, but I have to say that, as parents and grandparents, we all know that we do anything we could for our own children and grandchildren. What we've got to learn to do is to make that available for young people who don't have that fortunate background of having a family behind them. And, that's where we have to make the effort in the future. So that's my solution. Thank you.
So I actually have two main things that I really want to share. The first one is with Family Rights Group. They were actually able to help me gain my momentum back. So they actually allowed me to reconnect with my family after 10 years. And I was able to go back to my home country, Bangladesh, visit my mom. And obviously, when I went back, I kind of realized now I actually have a family that I need to think of. My mom was very sick, and I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back to London, and I'm going to work my arse off, and I'm going to make sure that my mom is able to see her daughter grow up, because we have lost so much of our time, together. And it was obviously not the greatest, but I had my motivation back. Secondly, with my council, Tower Hamlets, I hate the fact that some of us are lottery winners, which I hate. I don't know why it's such a thing, because every kid that's under the system, we already have it tough because we're labeled as disposable little things that you can just pass around, which is annoying. But my borough made me feel like a person. Obviously, I got into a 3K debt in arrears. They actually helped me cover all of that. So I started from fresh off when I was 18. I was able to restart my life, and then now I'm actually working for the borough that has helped me back on my feet. And obviously, that's one of my managers right there, so I'm trying to be nice and say positive things. But honestly, I think that some boroughs actually do such amazing things. And I'm just glad that my borough never gave up on me, because there was a time when I actually went through a deep depression. At 18, I became an alcoholic, which is very bad, so I spent a lot of my money on that. But they looked at me, they didn't think of me as someone that's, you know, giving up. They thought of me as someone that needs help and needs to be pushed into doing something better. And that's where I am now. And I have my own flat, I have my own cat, I have my little family, and I have my work family. So I just love the outcome of boroughs that do their jobs right. So thank you.
I'll try and keep it short because I know we're running out of time. I think the last 2 days is probably a good example for me of positivity, but also a bit of transparency between us all, because we all work in silos. The silo effect is the contributing factor to a lot of what we're experiencing. I'm talking from an employer perspective. Everyone becomes very protective of what they're trying to achieve. It becomes very grant or fund orientated, and we lose what we're all trying to achieve, and that's to help the individual. And I think if we can all break down some of those barriers and actually work in a more open manner, everyone benefits. And that for me is one of the biggest take-homes. It's been great that we've all been able to talk to each other over 2 days, and it's been amazing, and I think Fatima's done a great job getting everyone here. But if we all go away and then revert back to working in these silos and not being transparent on how we can work together to make that seamless transition and support, it becomes a very pointless exercise. I'm sorry if that's sounding negative, but I felt it's a real positive way of looking at it. And the reason I caveat that very simply, really, we work with a couple of organisations, Crisis UK being one of them, quite heavily. I mean, we've we've been very fortunate working with Crisis to have 12 guys start with us this year. A couple of them were mentioned by Joe Wicks on Christmas Day, to be fair to them. But the point being, that's been gained by an open and transparent relationship on both sides, on what's required. There is no hidden agenda in regards to funding, job outcomes, everything else. It's all about how do we support that individual on that journey and who can give what to support them. And if one or the other can't, then we look at someone else that can come into the equation to support. And I think really the key aspect for me is that we're all here today talking, but let's carry on the conversations, but let's make it into actions on how we all open that communication to actually have outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, this is, all the panels I've been on, people said it gets harder as you go down the line. It's getting harder, isn't it? I guess one of the things that, at the small level, what we do in Settle and what lots of other organisations that are here over the last 2 days do, you can make a difference. So, as I say, a third of the young people that we work with begin with us already in arrears. In the last 3 years, we've supported more than 85% of those young people to reduce or clear their arrears through the work that we've done with them. On average, that clearing arrears is, it's around £900 per person. We're not talking about large amounts of money, in fact, but for that young person, that £1,000, that's everything, because that's the thing that says, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to make it. I want to really shout out, in fact, Reese Foundation, who are one of the organisations that we have, coaches have written grant applications to get that little bit of money that's made a difference. National Energy Action, who've given young people that we work with that little bit of money to help them clear a utility debt. There are these sort of pockets out there. It's actually great to think about Child Trust Fund and whether there might well be young people that we work with who might be able to access a Child Trust Fund. These little pots of money that exist out there, the bits of work that we're doing, can make a real difference. But I think it is really important to take that step back and go, but it's not good enough that it is little pots of money and organisations like ourselves doing what we can. We are all the parents. We all took responsibility to be the parents of children whose parents couldn't look after them. And we as a society have to do better. We have to put more money in their pockets. We have to put more support around them. We have to give them a chance to make a mistake and go again, the same way that we would with our own kids.
I'm agreeing with you again, Dan. But, I think you're absolutely right. There's lots of organisations out there that are doing good pieces of work that can offer, you know, that whether it's your local authority, like you've had good support from, or there's organisations like ourselves that can help with some practical support. places like My Bank that will help you develop your financial knowledge and skills. But then there's bigger things that can be done. And I mean, Wales trialled like a universal basic income for its care leavers. And I know that, unfortunately, I think that's either coming to an end now or has come to an end. They're not going to adopt that. They're not going to roll it out because it's just too expensive for them to do that. But what that does mean is that for those individuals, they didn't have to rely on the benefit system. So they weren't thinking about the rules of universal credit to try and make it work when they were 18. You know, they had this universal income that they were given. And for me, I think it's a huge change, but it actually links, you know, exactly with one of Fatima's pledges in the white paper about if we do extend care to 25 and we're not expecting our 18-year-olds to somehow fit into all these other systems that are really quite oppressive at times and are broken and there's not enough money there for anybody, and we look at them as these are children that we are corporate parents for, then we can approach this very differently, and it would take a lot of people out of poverty if the system was just done differently and we looked after our children for longer.
Yeah, I feel like it's quite a big thing to sort of sit here and go, yeah, this is a solution, you know, like it's pretty fucking ambitious, you know, and I'm not really qualified, but what I can see is, everything they said, I agree. Yeah. But I think that I do feel like we are kind of working with some pretty unsophisticated economic policies. If we look at how much we spend on incarcerating people and the population of care leavers and homelessness and what addiction costs, and, you know, it's like you just sort of surely that money could be better spent somewhere else, and that kind of confuses me and stuff. And then I think about, you know, when you're young and, you know, adults tell you to save your money, don't blow it all on sweets or fags or puff or whatever it is, you know, and then yet we have a government that doesn't spend long term and pretty much is in crisis intervention and just sort of the mixed messages, you know. And then when I think about kind of what lifted me out of poverty, well, when I was 16 and I had a LAC review, you know, I was trying to negotiate with my local authority that they helped me buy a 3-bedroom house and I would rent out 3 rooms and live in the lounge. And I saw that as a sustainable option. And the IRO says, you know, you're in care, you know, that will never happen. And I kind of lost my head a bit, really, and got quite angry and defensive. And, you know, and strangely now, I'm a landlord of a property business and own HMOs, you know, so fuck you, you know. And I think when I think about what lifted me out of poverty, I mean, I had this realization, you know, that I could wake up street homeless, you know, in a car park, and at the end of the day, I could have £200 in my pocket to go and buy drugs, and I'd spent most of the day evaded getting arrested on most days. And I realised that actually I was quite the entrepreneur. And if I put 10% of that effort into, you know, getting money, and then I did, I just got a job on a building site and I got my head down and I grafted really hard and I tried to find the place with the cheapest rent. And I lived in shitholes, you know, and it wasn't ideal. And people used to say to me, you know, Ian, you need to live in a better condition, you need to live in better places. But then I just got the money for the first deposit, bought the first house, and then went back to living in cheap places, made the rent off that, and got the second deposit, and then went again. And it was just like really, really hard work. But what made that possible was people saw something in me, gave me an opportunity, and just kind of got alongside me and respected what I was trying to achieve. But I don't know what that is, because, you know, I didn't have, and still don't have, the best self-esteem, but something in me just knew. And even now, if I want to do a project, I don't think about where am I going to get the money from, how am I going to do it. If anything, that would put me off. You know, I just hold the vision and I just do the next right thing towards that. And every day, just do the one thing towards my goal that if I hadn't have done it, I wouldn't be that little bit closer to my goal. Every single day, whether it's my PhD, another property venture, whatever. So at the moment, I'm obsessing about a motorbike, but I'm not sure how good that is for me. But yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Yeah. I'm slightly lost for words because I don't think I can do justice to the quality of the panel, so I feel a bit humbled right now about what we've heard. I do one, because I've done 4 of these panels, so perhaps one overall reflection is, and something, and you were just talking about, like, to come up with one solution. Actually, there's so many people, there's so much will, but actually that's in this area. And it does come through to like, there's another level where we need a will in this country, a social change, a government-led change, just that whole cultural change to say, that's the bar for someone who has care. Not, oh, $3,000. $3,000 does not redress the imbalance of someone going through, no one's homogenous, but going through care experience versus not. And it just like, no, let's just make a social statement about, no, that's what's acceptable, that's the minimum. And then everything else will kind of line up, because we've done homelessness, we've done housing, we've done financial independence, and we did employment this morning as well. So I think, please, I'm genuinely overwhelmed. I think these guys are absolutely brilliant. They're just finishing, so let's nail this one, please. Let's thank Gavin, Salma, Daniele, Dan, Kerry and Ian for being a great panel. Thank you very much. So I'm 1 minute early, but that means that you get the brownies before that lot, so enjoy.